So it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Ms. Cynthia Blankenship, who is Vice Chair, Corporate President, and Chief Financial Officer of the Bank of the West, which is in Grapevine. And if you ask Cindy where Grapevine is, if you land at DFW Airport, then that's where Grapevine is. It's all around there. But the daughter of a preacher in Crum, Texas, a small town which is north of Fort Worth, she began her banking career as a teller at the Farmers and Merchants State Bank. I want to repeat that. She began her banking career as a teller. I still think that's the hardest job in banking. Would you agree with that? Even if it's a cyber teller, whatever you call that. She went on to work at the First National Bank of Grapevine and quickly rose through the ranks, ultimately being promoted to cashier and head of operations. Soon, she met her husband and now her lifetime business partner, Gary Blankenship, and they would run several banks throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, ultimately settling in, and in 1986 chartering their current banking enterprise, the Bank of the West in Grapevine, a $450 million bank, 8 locations of state bank, let me mention that, state bank, 8 locations specializing in small business lending. Cindy has dedicated her career to service to others. Her list of accomplishments reads like a who's who in banking. Among the most notable are Chairman of the Independent Bankers Association of Texas in 2002, inaugural Chairman of the IBAT Education Foundation, which raised $1 million in Texas for financial literacy. She was appointed Dean for Bankers and Chairperson of the Southwestern Graduate School of Banking. From 2006 to 2009, she was named Distinguished Alumni of the Southwestern Graduate School of Banking in 2009. She became chair of the Independent Community Bankers of America in 2008 and 2009 during the recession that we all are aware of, and I can't think of a better person to run that organization during that trying time. She served on the ICBA Executive Committee from 2006 to 2016. Named one of the most 50 powerful women in banking by the U.S. Banking Magazine in 2004. Named as one of the great women in Texas in 2010. Cindy has testified on Capitol Hill before the House and Senate committees several times. She has attended meetings at the White House, including a nationally televised press conference with President Barack Obama and Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. And as recently as May of this year, she was invited to the White House with a small group of bankers. She recently completed her term as on the FDIC Banker Advisory Board. She continues to be active by testifying and making trips to Washington, D.C., and I can attest to that because I see her there many times. Despite her busy service to the banking industry, she is active in her community with service to the Grapevine Chamber of Commerce, the Grapevine Convention and Visitors Bureau, and many other local organizations. Cindy and her husband Gary have 3 daughters and 1 granddaughter, right? She has been called the Energizer Bunny because she never slows down. And she has a strong belief in the importance of community banking to America. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia Blankenship.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for that. That was more than I know about myself, so I'm not sure where you got all that, but I'll say it's true. It's great. First of all, thank you so much. It's just quite an honor to be here tonight, and special thanks to you, Commissioner, for bestowing that honor upon me to have you ask me to be the keynote speaker. And I must admit, when he first asked, I said, I'm honored. Of course, I'd like to do it, but tell me about the group. And he said, well, it's a third academics, a third regulators, and a third bankers. So 2/3 of you really intimidate me. I'll let you figure out which 2/3. That being said, I hope I can share my message with you tonight. And he did give you some of my background. I wasn't born into banking, but we have a saying in Texas. It says, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as quick as I could. So I feel that way about banking. My first job was a teller at a small country bank, and it was the summer after high school. And I thought, oh, that'd be a great, segue until I go off to college. Little did I know that my dream of becoming an archaeologist would be replaced with a career banker. And I know that's quite a juxtaposition, but it got in my blood. And, I think that my dad, being a Baptist preacher, he wasn't one of those hellfire and brimstone preachers, but he was a teacher. And I learned a lot from listening to him about, feeling passion and really doing the right thing and really doing that with a servant's heart. And as all of you know, because you're here because you volunteer in some way. You are volunteering to promote community banking. And so for me and for all of you alike, I know that's a very easy thing to do. So as the commissioner said, I did get involved through the state associations. And I look back on your prior speakers, and that was a little intimidating in itself because I know each one of your prior keynote speakers and listened to their message and how inspiring it was. So it was quite a challenge for me because when I asked the commissioner what to speak about, he said, oh, just talk about something you feel passionate about that promotes the future of community banking. Okay, can I get a little more direction? But so I had many conversations with the staff here, and they were able to give me some directions. And special thanks to you, Jim, for your counsel. And what we decided is that we'd just maybe share a little bit of my story of why I think community bankers, as well as this group, needs to stay involved and really be passionate and tell that story and have that grassroots efforts. Because unless you go to Washington and you make yourself present in the moment, what I learned from the 2008-2009 crisis, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. That was a saying that we had back then, and because when I came into office as the national chairman in the spring of 2008, things were great, guys, in banking. You remember it was this can be an awesome year, and that summer Indy Mac happened, and I don't have to tell you about the dark fall of 2009, but my life changed. My life changed as the national chairman because I was getting media calls every day, and that's not my day job. But I'm the type of person, as I'm sure you all are, if you commit to something, you certainly want to do your best, and at the very least and the most, you don't want to embarrass the people that you're representing. So it took a lot of time, it took a lot of energy, and It was a learning experience for all of us. But it really does emphasize right size regulation. And I commend this group for focusing on the fact that the community bank model is a different basic business model than the SIFIs, than the too big to fail banks. And we saw that during the crisis. I remember one time I was leaving the Texas convention and driving back home, and I got a call, and it said, you need to pull over at a truck stop and hop on a conference call with Treasury Secretary Paulson. Okay, I had no advance notice. Okay. Well, that call was regarding the unlimited guarantee of money market funds. Remember that? When to quell the panic in the market. And our concern for community banks was that the consumer, most consumers don't know the difference between a money market fund at an investment house and a money market account at a bank. So if you didn't insure the money market accounts and extend that same unlimited guarantee, then there's going to be this big sucking sound out of community banks. And, you know, I don't think Treasury at the time had quite thought about the unintended consequences that that particular action may have caused for small towns all across America for community banks. So we were able to get that, and so that was a time when just having a voice and explaining, having the platform to explain, you know, what could have been a crisis within a crisis. So that was important. Another time we were called to Treasury to talk about TARP because the big banks had all taken TARP funds. And it was me and two other community bankers, and we went in and met with Treasury Secretary Paulson and some of his staff. It was a rather small meeting, and we were talking about TARP, and they were telling us how, you know, this was a really good program, and it was. A lot of banks needed that relief. But a lot of community banks didn't need it. There were some, you know, that were in the distressed areas. But he said to me, "Are you going to take TARP?" And I said, "No, I'm not planning on it." And he said, "Why? Why wouldn't you do that?" I said, "Well, number one, we're well capitalized. You know, I think with our projections and our basic business plan, we don't need it. But number two, I'm a Subchapter S bank, and you don't have a term sheet for Subchapter S banks. So even if I wanted to exercise that option, I couldn't." So he turns to Jeb Mason, who was his assistant at the time, said, you know, find out about Sub S. And they did get a term sheet, but it was, I think it was in the following January. So, so those banks that needed it in those 3 months were kind of left out. And you know, you have to understand that Subchapter S banks make up 1/3 of all community banks. So it's an important sector. And I think sometimes when we're focused on the big banks, we don't think about those little banks out there, you know, in Oklahoma and Texas and Illinois and other states that have a high concentration of those family-owned Subchapter S type banks. So there again, you have to be there to tell the story so you don't get those unintended consequences. So I made several trips, as the Commissioner referred to Washington. I met with both presidents, George W. Bush and President Barack Obama. The weekend I got the call to go up and meet with President Obama, he had just gone into office. And it was February, and so they called, and you know, they call you like 6 times over the weekend, ask you the same questions. Where were you born? What's your mother's name? Come on. But they did decide the meeting was going to materialize. And that particular meeting was focused on the SBA program. And, you know, since we were in crisis mode, they wanted to make sure that the SBA program was available to those small businesses in distress and all that. And so I was in the right place, the right time. I was the national chairman. Our bank's been a SBA preferred lender since we opened in the mid-'80s. So what worked against me, I was a Republican. I was from Texas, but I still got invited. And so we went and met they had SBA customers. I was the only community banker in the room, and they had a credit union and some of the senators and congressmen in the Roosevelt room. So I thought that was really cool. And when we I remember going in the tables there, and they have these name placards, and I see my name and then an empty spot, and then Treasury Secretary Geithner, and I was like, this is so cool. I'm one away from Treasury Secretary Geithner, you know. And he came in, and then right before they closed the doors, they came in and set this wooden circle down. It was POTUS. And right beside me, well, I was like, okay. But he came in, he was very friendly, you know, and I'm sure, you know, I don't know if they have a feed or he's just very well prepared. But immediately it put me at ease because he said, you know, Cynthia is the only community banker in the room, and we know the important role that community banks play. And so that was encouraging. Immediately after that meeting was over, one of his staff came over and said, do you know about we had to do a little one-page write-up about our bank, and he said, do you know what that says? I said, well, yeah, I wrote it, so yeah. And he said, would you mind reading that? We're going to do a little press conference. Would you mind reading that? And I said, no, that's fine. Well, they took me and this little sandwich shop owner, and then it was the President Obama and Secretary Geithner. They took us through the White House to the green room, and we were in there, it seemed like forever, but they came out and said, you know, now they're going to call POTUS and Treasury Secretary and then you. And I remember the doors opened and there was press cameras, but we all read our statements, and it was just such an incredible opportunity to be able, again, to have a national stage to tell your story. And I tell that just because I couldn't have planned that, you know. It doesn't take special talent. It just takes passion. It just takes a belief that you believe in something that's good. And I was so encouraged by the studies today and by this entire conference, because obviously our community bank franchise is very personal. My husband and I started the bank. We chartered it with $2 million, 10 shareholders, and 5 employees. So in 1985, I was the cashier, but I kind of did everything. I typed my own notes. I ran the proof machine if she was sick. And you know, we've grown. I don't do those things. I don't know that I could today, but I like to say I did. But there's opportunity. And the reason there was opportunity is because Community Bank fills a need on Main Street. And again, you guys know this because it's the reason you're doing this conference. But encourage your bankers to get out there and be involved. Encourage them to make that trip to DC when it is intimidating, and it is intimidating. But if they will, I'm fortunate. I have a commissioner that believes you have to put feet on the street in Washington to make a difference. And that's what we're really all trying to do, is make a difference and really bring awareness that there really is a segregated industry within the industry, and that community banks are different business models. And I was so encouraged by some of the comments today that, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to look. They said community banks really make a difference in the lives of people, and that was by one of Keynote, I think. And then Jacob said, real people make good decisions, and they're really trying to find ways to give back. And I never thought that banks did that. And that was so encouraging to me, and thank you guys for noticing that and for saying that, because I have two millennials, and and I wonder sometimes if they realize that we really make a difference, but they do. They do. That's encouraging. We have to continue to try to make a difference, because if we don't, we're going to look like a Canada or some of the models in the EU. And there is not another financial landscape, successful financial system. We are superb in the world, and we need to continue to work. Our model's not broken. And yes, I think we see M&A, we see consolidation, but I was asked last week what I thought about the future of community banking. And regulation is tough on us, guys. I've hired 3 extra people in the last couple of years. And it is hard. It is hard for us to find time to respond to your comment letters. It is hard for us to find time to go to the state capitol, to go to the national capitol. But we have to do it. We have to do it to protect our franchise. But that being said, I still think today, community banking has an opportunity like we've never had before. I think we are at the cusp of really becoming and being such an integral part of the future of our financial system. And if I didn't believe in that, I couldn't do what I do. And you guys believe in it too. And that is so inspiring to bankers like us. And I'm talking to not just a group of bankers. So for you academics and you regulators, thank you for wanting to preserve our franchise. I truly think for banks, like we have a branch in Ponder, Texas. We're the only bank in town. It makes a difference, guys. It really does. Thank you for your studies about what kind of differences that the community bank model makes. Thank you for all your efforts, and thank you for having me here tonight.